invested so heavily in that, and it was all thanks to Nigel. And I might have mentioned this before on this podcast or another. I still have it, and I need to bring it and really embarrass him one day. But one day, probably in 1990 or so, maybe 91, I don't know the exact year. But my dad had a photocopier in the office of his Saab, Park Road Saab service in Burlingame, California. And I decided one night, Graham, that I needed to consolidate every Nigel Roebuck article in every fifth column, every Formula One report that I had accumulated in all the magazines I owned. And so I cannot tell you how many hundreds of pounds of pro sports and whatever else is that I brought with me. But I went down to the shop late one night and spent hours upon hours photocopying everything. And, this was, again, 25, 30 years ago. I still have it. It's this big, thick, 2 or 3 inch wide binder of all of his fifth columns and you name it. And I used to just read through them like an anthology. So that's...
We've got to get you at Daytona in a T-shirt with Nigel's face on it. That's got to be done.
Right there. I'm with you. That absolutely has to happen. And we actually have been trying to do a podcast on a couple of topics that he said he'd be keen to do. So I hope we can do that as well. And I'll just mention the one other one, which might sound a little Homerish, but it's true. Other one is my longtime colleague, friend, co-pilot, co-conspirator, Robin Miller. And I love the guy to death. He's the biggest a-hole in the world, but in the best way. He admits it. And at his core, Robin is a sweetheart, but his public persona is a little gruff, and he plays it up just as I play up mine a little bit from time to time. But Robin Miller's another one on the IndyCar side. And I know that there are some, maybe even more than some, who are not fond of Robin and or his work. I just find brilliance in it as an old newspaper man. And granted, he started out same as me. He was a IndyCar mechanic back in the 60s. Just amazing to think of him at the Speedway at 17 years old. But Robin's been another huge inspiration, so I'll quit prattling on. But whereas Roebuck has this amazing ability to paint pictures with words and make you feel as if you know Mario Andretti, Gilles Villeneuve, Jean Behra, whomever it is that growing up knew the names but had never met any of these folks. Nigel has the amazing ability to make you feel as if you're friends with the legends of the sport. Robin has the ability to tell a story. Robin can spin a yarn about the simplest, most mundane thing and make it a truly enjoyable and breezy 300 words or 1,000 words, whatever it might be. And so I will not claim to possess any of their talent. I will absolutely admit that I'm jealous and constantly trying to unlock the code how to be more like them. And I'm very thankful to know both men and consider them both friends. They would not say the same, but at least from my end, I am happy to make such admissions.
Well, I'll rattle through my two, one of whom is a close personal friend, the other one I've never met. But I would say to you, my first inspiration was actually not a motorsport journalist, but an automotive journalist, and a gentleman by the name of Russell Bulgin, who wrote. I first became aware of Russell's work when he was, I think it was either Performance Car or Car magazine, and it was the style of writing. Russell died very young, plagued by cancer, but he was a thoroughly entertaining writer, and it was just a different way of reading about a subject I was fairly passionate about, very much a petrolhead, and a storyteller. And that, in that way, I guess very much the same as Nigel, in that it is that storytelling rather than chronology sort of style that appealed to me. And so Russell's writing was firmly appealed, and his a collection of his works that was sold, I think in memory of him and for charity for the Royal Marsden, which is a hospital actually based just down the road from where I'm standing talking to you right now, by his friends. That book is described as unobtainium, and I'd love a copy of it. So Russell was the first one. The second one is my founding editor at Daily Sports Car, a man who gave me the opportunity to do what I love, a man by the name of Malcolm Cracknell. And I would say that Malcolm is something of a visionary. Mid-90s, decided he'd had enough of teaching at a boys' school and wanted to do something that lit the fire again, and established a thing called Sports Car World in the mid-90s when the internet was very young. And that gave me and a number of other people the opportunity to come and try their hand at doing this motorsport journalism thing. I was and am a trained journalist. I was unlucky enough to be caught the wrong side of an industry downturn. And it was many years after I left my journalistic training that I actually finally worked professionally as a journalist. And Malcolm gave me that opportunity and taught me a huge amount in terms of structure, in terms of the morality of actually the way in which we report on this one. And very many of the little bits of wisdom that I pass on to the youngsters that come through our doors came directly from Malcolm. I have that to thank him for. I've nothing more to say about Malcolm than that, other than, love him dearly. He's a fabulous individual. He's not quite as crotchety as Robin, but he can't be far back from that. Definitely, I think the Americanism is ornery, isn't it?
Ornery, he's an ornery. SOB.
Yeah. Yes. But funny as. I mean, Malcolm, not in the best of health nowadays, does have a mobility scooter, and fabulously fashioned the bodywork of the mobility scooter to look like a miniature Land Rover. So, which is hilarious. But it's that. Everything's a story. Everything is personal. Everything, and everybody is given the opportunity to tell their story, and that, I'm afraid, is sometimes how the inconceivable becomes news, becomes an opportunity for people to follow that and to get involved in that. And at times that leads to something quite wonderful. And we've had a number of occasions when somebody's had the opportunity to just share that vision, and somehow programs have got off the ground. I owe him absolutely everything in this business, and I've nothing more to say about it than that.
Let's jump to a couple of questions here on GTE and GT3, and with the nickname of the last name Assassin. You see certain names, Graham, and this is premeditated murder. Chris Alvaby, maybe? Alphaby? I don't know. I apologize. I'm sure there's mangling. There's at least a couple of knife wounds there. I can't say if I killed you altogether, Chris. You've sent this in a couple times. I apologize, as Graham notes. We try to get to all that we can each week. Sometimes sending them back in will help, which certainly helps here. Chris says, will we see GTE Pro or AM teams compete in the Sebring 12-hour next year? Mm-hmm. And what would be your dream GTE car? So this is obviously piggybacking off of Friday's WEC race, where GTE Pro and AM entries will participate. Curious, Graham, if you think or have heard any rumblings come next March, if some of those 10-hour-ish racers on Friday might stay in play for 12 more in under IMSA sanction on Saturday.
Well, I think the answer is they might, but it probably won't be the same car. So certainly there is the potential for some of those teams to do both races. There are certainly potential for some of the teams to have additional cars for one or two of those races. Now, I mean, a couple of teams that might, okay, and I'm operating at the moment without having had the facility of asking them. Gulf Racing have a second Porsche in the fabulous Gulf colours. I might decide that actually that would be a fabulous place to be. It would, of course, be a highly unusual thing in IMSA competition now to have a GTLM car with a Pro-Am driving squad in it, because that generally tends to go to GTD. One of the others that just might, and this is quite an interesting prospect, is Paul Dalla Lana. as we know, has got one of the newest of the brand new V8 Vantages. He will not be able to race that car in the WEC, because the WEC it's not been homologated yet for AM competition. But he will be able to race his new car in IMSA competition. So it's just possible we might see Paul, Pedro Lamy, and Matthias Lauda in the fabulous old lady that is the current V8 Vantage GTE in the WEC race, and the new car, the AMG turbo engine car, in the 12-hour. That would be quite fun, wouldn't it?
Oh, it absolutely would. Let's.
What would be my dream GTE car? He asks as well. You know what I miss? I miss the cookie. I miss the slightly kind of left field. I was talking to someone about this. I miss the days of Spreaker and Morgan and Panos. Actually, it came out of the Don Panos thing and the TVRs. TVR, I hope they come and do it. I hope they come and do it. I hope one of these smaller, more boutique manufacturers finds the budget and comes and takes on the world. Maybe gets a great result once or twice, maybe goes down in a blaze of glory, hopefully not literally. But I'd like to see a boutique manufacturer taking on the BMWs, the Porsches, the Ferraris, the Aston Martins of this world and having a good old crack. I miss that aspect of GTE, GT2. It's a shame that for the moment at least has gone, and I hope that comes back. That would be great to see.
I don't know if they would fit, Graham, but the one boutique manufacturer that I know I would love to see the most is Koenigsegg. And I mean, their cars tend to make so much power that there would have to be some extreme efforts to get them into that 500 to 550 range we see as kind of the general target being presented. The reason I would love to see Koenigsegg, although I don't think there's any good business argument knowing that they're a low-volume manufacturer, but of the boutique constructors putting GT-ish hypercar things on the road, they really seem to be the only ones trying to advance the state of technology at play. And whether it's the engine internals and rotating mass and trying to delete this, and just really seems like their mission, on top of making cars that go 8,000 miles an hour, is to say, hey, cool, okay, internal combustion engines and braking systems and this and that's cool, got it. Where can we maybe challenge or question some of the norms? And is there something we can replace? Is there something we can make redundant? Is there something we can improve on the efficiency side in ways that go beyond the normal, we improved, emissions by 2%, or we gained 1% in fuel efficiency? There just seems to be a spirit there that I like about them, Graham, where I would think in a GTE/GTLM construct, they might be able to prove some of that and maybe get the automotive world thinking a little bit freer. I don't know if that serves them in any way. I just know that they're among the only ones that stand out to me, at least, where I go, thanks, guys. Thanks for really pushing, because you care.
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, we know that Christian Koenigsegg has talked about the new hypercar regulations, and there's a speculation that he actually didn't understand what they might be. But one can hope that, number one, they might find their way into that. But if they don't, that his interest is piqued enough in sports car racing to have a look at the other opportunities in regulation. It's missing, isn't it? Something is missing at the moment. We have had through just about my entire lifetime of sports car racing, where there's always been, a pretender. There's always been somebody coming in and looking at Ferrari and looking at, at Porsche and thinking, we'll have some of that. I can remember a conversation relayed to me by Martin Short at Roll Centre Racing that he had at the time. Martin was the importer for the Mosler brand into Europe and built the race cars too. I had this conversation with Stefan Rattel, and Stefan saying words to the effect of, and Stefan, if you're listening, apologise if I'm paraphrasing, he doesn't understand why British GT racers didn't just buy a